Chapter 13. Once they were back in the car, Luke handed his iPhone to Kate and asked her to go online and see what she could find out about the haunting. She typed, "Bridal Barn Murder, Waxahachie, Texas," into the search engine and clicked on the first link that appeared. What was supposed to be a joyous occasion quickly turned into a family's worst nightmare when Grace Bledsoe, a Waxahachie native and bride-to-be, was found slaughtered in her wedding dress. She was 24 years old. Kate read. Her body was discovered by her bridesmaids who went searching for her after she failed to show up for a photo shoot. Kate read on silently. It says they found her fiancé's best man, Daniel Ford, with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head after someone reported seeing him leaving the barn. His fingerprints were discovered at the scene, and they found a knife covered in Grace's blood on his person. Well, they definitely weren't lacking in evidence, Luke remarked. When did all this happen? About 2 years ago. What was her fiancé's name? Luke asked. Jim Loveday. Neither he nor his family made any sort of statement. That's okay. At least now we've got something to go on. How long ago did they shut it down? Michael asked. Only a few months. It says that the people who owned it are hoping to reopen it again sometime, but after what happened, they just can't find anyone interested in having a wedding there. A few minutes later, they came upon a weathered sign that read, Chapel at Bluebonnet Trail. Luke turned into the driveway. They drove through pitch darkness for another 30 seconds or so, before a building appeared off to the right. Most of its windows were boarded up, but Kate could still make out the circle of stained glass just below the steeple. Luke parked a few meters away. If the chapel's here, the barn can't be much further, he reasoned. Again, they clambered out of the car and began to assemble their equipment. This time, however, the world around them was so dark that they each needed their own individual flashlight to see a few feet in front of them. Kate wasn't sure what it was, but as they trekked along the graveled pathway that Luke guessed would lead them to the barn, the familiar feeling that they were being watched by some unseen presence returned. She shone her flashlight into the surrounding woods, expecting to see a flash of eyes, or maybe even a shadowy figure darting around through the trees, trying to evade her glance. Are you okay? Michael asked. Yeah, she replied. It's just creepy out here. Don't you love it? Luke asked. Kate couldn't see his face, but she was pretty sure he was grinning. If I could visit locations like this and get paid for it. Oh wait, I do. I would so love to hit you right now, Michael told him. I've told you before, Mikey. You want to be on the show, you just say the word. Thanks, Michael muttered. He's offered you a spot on the show? Kate asked Michael. That was new information. Why didn't you take it? You'd have so much fun. You get to see a bunch of new places, and you'd be on television. See, Mikey, she has a brain, Luke remarked. It's just not my thing, Michael told them. Whatever you say, Luke sighed, as a broad and very neglected building came into view. Unlike the chapel, no one had bothered to board up the windows, all of which were cracked, shattered, or non-existent. The brick-colored paint was chipping away to reveal the wooden planks beneath it. Glancing up to the second story, Kate began to feel the world closing in around her. Something was watching them from that window. She couldn't see it, but it was there. Suddenly, that barn was the last place on Earth Kate wanted to be. She wanted to run, to climb back into the car, and get as far away from that horrible place as quickly as possible. Luke and Michael took a few steps towards the pathway leading up to the porch. Kate remained frozen on the spot. You coming? Luke asked her. I don't know if we should do this, she told them. What? Luke asked. Why not? I just feel like whatever's in there really doesn't want us disturbing it. Kate, if you were murdered, wouldn't you want to be able to tell the world what happened to you? Well, yeah, but if you'd stayed dead after your car accident, wouldn't you have wanted to talk to someone? Hey, knock it off, Michael snapped. If she doesn't want to go, then she doesn't have to. You don't have to bring up stuff like that. What? She's not sensitive about it, are you? Luke asked Kate. No, but, see, no problems. Kate was still hesitant. Kate, I promise. Nothing bad will happen. I do this all the time and under a lot nastier circumstances. Did you see the episode where we investigated the witch's house where they used to perform satanic rituals? Or what about the music hall with all those demonic entities? As a matter of fact, she had seen those episodes, and if memory served, Luke and his crew had spent the next weeks being haunted and scratched and God knows what else by those spirits that had decided to latch onto them. A more skeptical person may have laughed over the idea of an invisible figure following them home from a haunted location, but she'd already had a ghost. She didn't want another one. Still, they had come all this way, and she'd been the one who'd said she wanted to make the most of a ghost hunt with Luke Rayner. She couldn't back out now. Okay, she agreed. That a girl. Luke grinned. They followed the porch around the side of the barn until they finally found the front door, which had been chained and shackled shut by a large, rusted paddock. That looks locked, Michael remarked. Never fear, Mikey. Where there's a will, there's a way, Luke assured him, gently setting his camera on the ground. Kate, may I see the backpack, please? She passed it to him. He rummaged around in it for a few seconds before he pulled out a pen and a large paperclip. Are you going to pick it? Kate asked. Yep. Wait, what? Michael demanded. We're going to break in? How do you think this business works, Mikey? As a professional, yes, I prefer to call ahead and get permission. But back when I first started out and no one wanted me inside their decrepit old buildings, I had to learn how to pick a few locks. Are you crazy? We'll get caught. By who? A possum? There's no one out here. Michael exchanged a wary look with Kate before the soft click of the lock turned their attention back to Luke. We're in, he announced, pulling the chains off from around the handles. But don't worry, Mikey. I'll put the lock back just the way we found it, Luke patronized, pulling the door open with a loud creak. Although the air inside of the barn was much cooler than the humid summer night outside, it was still stuffy and musty from months of being locked up and undisturbed. While Kate and Luke shone their flashlights around, taking in the dusty decor, the brown leather couches, the old-fashioned fireplace, the Western-themed tapestry that hung on the wall, and the narrow, winding staircase, Michael's eyes drifted up to the second story, where the shadowy figure of a woman in a floating gown watched them from the railing. Kate, turn on the recorder, Luke whispered. Got it, she replied. Luke cleared his throat. Hello? Grace? Are you here? A swift movement out of the corner of Michael's eye almost caused him to jump back. He turned his camera in her general direction and shifted his eyes just above the flip screen, praying silently that she wouldn't notice him staring. She now stood in front of the staircase, her pretty face screwed up in what can only be called contempt for intruders. What do you want? She hissed. Luke, Kate said, unaware of the girl's presence. The recorder just died. Luke's face lit up. She's here. I just put fresh batteries in that thing, he said. Did you just drain all the energy from this recorder? Michael's eyes shifted back to the girl, who looked confused and irritated. The way she stared at Luke reminded Michael of the way a girl might stare at someone who'd just used a really terrible pickup line. Do you want me to change the batteries? Kate asked. Actually, I was thinking we could try the spirit box, Luke answered. I thought you said it was loud and annoying, Michael said. It is, but it will spare us the trouble of having to go back and rewind to hear what she has to say, Luke explained, setting his night vision camera onto a ledge. It made sense, Michael acknowledged, as Luke pulled a rectangular black device out of his backpack. It looked a lot like a larger version of the digital recorder. And Luke was right. It was loud and annoying. It was more than static, as Kate had described. It was like static slowed down so that you could almost make out certain sounds, and it was 10 times as loud. How are you supposed to hear through this? Michael had to yell to be heard above the racket coming out of the SB-7. Trust me, you'll be able to, Luke replied. Grace, he called out. Are you here, Grace? Michael glanced back at their spectral visitor. She was a beautiful girl, with wavy dark brown hair and big dark eyes, dressed in an elegant yet simple lace wedding gown. She'd clasped her hands over her ears, clearly just as put off by the device as they were. "Turn that thing off!" she screamed. At the same time, her voice broke through the static of the spirit box. "Off!" Michael stared at the device. "It actually works." "Told you," Luke grinned. "What is it?" Grace asked. "What?" the spirit box relayed. Grace eyed it curiously. "What is this? This is a spirit box. You can talk through it," Luke explained. "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped. "Don't want to." "Why does it only pick up fragments of sentences?" Michael asked, still competing with the disruptive volume of the spirit box. Both Luke and Kate looked at him. Michael instantly regretted asking the question. How would he know that a ghost was actually saying more than what the box conveyed? Quickly, he tried to cover for himself. "I mean, no one actually talks like that." "Maybe it has to do with the energy," Kate suggested. "I think it has to do with the device itself," Luke replied. "Grace, why don't you want to talk to us?" Michael glanced back to the spot where Grace had been standing. She wasn't there. Michael looked around the room, wondering just how he'd missed her. "Grace!" Luke called again. "Stop!" Kate yelled, grabbing Luke's shoulder. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Luke asked, but Michael had heard it too. Above the roar of the spirit box, it was almost inaudible, but it was there. The screech of a wooden chair being dragged across the floor above them. "Turn that off," Kate said, indicating the SB7. "Listen." With the sudden absence of the irritating static, the silence was almost deafening. It didn't stay so for long. Footsteps, soft but distinguishable, paced anxiously back and forth across the floor above them. "Come on, Grace. We just want to talk to you," Luke called up to her. Seconds later, a small hard object bounced off the ground near their feet. Kate shrieked and leapt back. Luke wasn't as easily shaken. "What the hell was that, Gracie? You throwing rocks at us?" Grace appeared once again at the foot of the stairs, glowering fiercely at Luke. "Don't call me Gracie!" But without the spirit box, her harsh voice fell on mostly deaf ears. "I'm going to turn the spirit box back on, okay, Gracie?" He pressed a button and again the irritating static broke the silence of the barn. "Who are you?" she asked. This time, the spirit box conveyed the entire phrase. "Who are you?" "Who are you? Did you hear that?" Luke asked his companions. "My name is Luke. This is Kate and Michael. Do you have anything you want to tell us?" "No, get out! Get out!" Kate exchanged an apprehensive glance with Michael, but Luke pressed on. "Why don't you want to talk to us?" By now, Grace was seething. The temperature in the barn dropped even further, and as she growled in frustration, Michael felt the all-too-familiar rush of dizziness as she drained away his energy. Kate seemed to feel it too. She pressed a hand to her forehead, like she was trying to ward off a headache, and squeezed her eyes shut. "Kate?" Michael tried calling out to her before another wave of dizziness nearly knocked him off his feet. He slumped against a wall and took a few deep breaths. "Come on, Grace, you don't have anything to say?" As his vertigo subsided, Michael glanced up just in time to see Grace summon every ounce of newly acquired energy and send something, probably a small vase, toppling off of the coffee table next to the couch. It hit the ground with a loud crash, heard even above the spirit box. Kate screamed. Luke jumped back. "Whoa!" he cried. "Did you see that? Mikey, did you get that on tape?" Luke turned and looked at Michael. He didn't respond. He was frozen, staring into the virulent eyes of Grace Bledsoe. "Turn. Look away. Blink. Do something!" A voice in the back of his mind screamed at him. His body didn't obey. He'd seen her, and she knew it. He could avert his eyes as much as he wanted, but it wouldn't do him any good. "Mikey!" Luke's voice finally tore him away from Grace's hostile gaze. "What's going on?" he asked. But before Michael could reply, Grace's voice once again rang loud and clear, not only through his ears, but through the cold, loathsome speaker of the spirit box. "He can see me." Chapter 14. 3 things happened almost simultaneously. First, the screens on both night vision cameras flickered before going completely blank. Second, the spirit box short-circuited with a loud pop and began emitting a penetrating, high-pitched squeal that continued even after Luke tried to turn it off. Finally, a bright light the color of a fire truck began to flash around the room, rekindling the headache that Kate had been fighting since before the vase flew off the table. "What is this?" she yelled, as a new loud buzzing noise began to pulsate through the already shrill atmosphere. "It's the fire alarm! She must have set it off!" Luke yelled back, frantically gathering all the equipment and stuffing as much as he could into the backpack, which he quickly passed off to Kate in order to grab his camera. "I thought they would have taken the batteries out of it," Michael shouted. "They probably did," Luke responded. "Come on, we've got to get out of here!" Neither Kate nor Michael argued with him. Less than a minute later, they'd abandoned the chaotic barn and were sprinting blindly through the darkness. It was difficult to see more than a few feet in front of her. Kate had to listen to make sure she didn't get separated from the guys. She couldn't help but notice they weren't on the gravel pathway anymore, and she hoped and prayed that Luke had a better sense of direction than she did. "Come on, I think the car is this way," Luke yelled from somewhere up ahead. As Kate looked around, trying with all her might to pinpoint his location in the dark, she tripped over something and tumbled to the ground with a loud, "Oof!" "Kate!" Michael called. "Give me the camera," she heard Luke say. Seconds later, Michael was standing beside her. He knelt down next to her, took her hand, and pulled her to her feet. A nasty jolt of pain shot from her knee down the front of her leg as she grimaced. "You okay?" Luke asked. "Fine," Kate managed, hobbling along as fast as she could. "Here, give me the backpack." Michael took the backpack from her and slung it over his left shoulder. He then took her arm and wrapped it around his back, supporting her with the right side of his body. Together, they followed Luke back to the car. By the time they got there, Luke had already loaded the 2 video cameras into the trunk and was waiting to take the backpack. Michael helped Kate into the back seat of the Lexus so she could prop up her leg while Luke finished loading the trunk. Both Michael and Luke had just climbed into the front of the car when the distant wail of a siren filled the air. "Okay, we're going." Luke turned on the ignition and sped off into the night. "How's your knee?" Michael asked, turning around to look at Kate. "It's fine," she replied. Truth be told, it didn't feel as bad as it could. She was pretty sure she'd scraped it, and she knew there'd be a nasty bruise there tomorrow, but nothing felt broken. "We're still going to put some ice on it as soon as we hit a gas station," Luke told her. Kate didn't object. "Guess you were right about something not wanting us there." "What happened back there?" she asked. Grace went ballistic. Not the first time it's happened to me, but that was pretty violent. Not to mention it was totally unprovoked. "No, before that. She said something. She said you could see her." She turned to Michael. Everything had started happening so quickly after the EVP was captured that she hadn't had time to dwell on it. But now she was curious. "Could you?" she asked. "Yeah," he replied shortly, without meeting her eye. "Oh my God! What did she look like? Was she in a wedding dress?" "She looked angry," Michael answered. "And yeah, she was in her dress." "Wow! I wish you'd said something." "Trust me, Kate, it's a miracle you're getting this much out of him," Luke remarked from the driver's seat. "What do you mean?" "Luke?" Michael cast him a warning glare. "Mikey can see ghosts. He's been seeing them his entire life, but this is the first time he's willingly broached the subject. Around me, anyway." "What are you talking about?" Kate asked. Did Luke really expect her to believe that Michael was some sort of medium or something? Nothing, Michael insisted. But Kate got the feeling that he was talking more to Luke than to her. You know, Mikey, I think you're full of it. I think if you didn't want her to know, you'd have tried a little harder to stop me. Hell, if you really didn't want her to know, you wouldn't have agreed to come along tonight. But I can't blame you. It must be a real nuisance trying to keep something like a sixth sense a secret for 27 years. I bet you even feel a little relieved right now, even though you'll never admit it. You can't be serious, Kate said. Michael turned to look at her, almost like he'd forgotten she was there. Why? Luke asked. Because it's… What, impossible? Luke interrupted. This coming from the girl with a ghost smashing cameras in her living room? He had her there. Still, she wasn't quite convinced. She'd had a friend in high school who had sworn up and down that she could see and communicate with spirits, but in the end, she'd been all talk. But then, Michael had never said anything at all. He would have had to say something if all he wanted was attention. She looked back to Michael. Can you? He looked like the last thing he wanted was to answer her question. That was enough. How? I don't know, Michael replied. They've just always been there. Do you talk to them? Are you like those mediums on TV who stop people on the street to tell them their dead aunt has a message for them? I'm pretty sure some of those shows are scripted, Luke commented. Is this how you guys became friends? Kate asked. You found out about the ghosts? Not exactly, but it is the reason I've been trying to get him on the show for the past 2 years, Luke replied. That's what I don't understand. You don't need me on your show. It's already, the second highest rated ghost show on television? Michael asked. It has nothing to do with ratings, Mikey. Don't you get it? If all I cared about was ratings, I wouldn't be giving you the time of day. I'd be out celebrating my success, partying it up on the West Coast with a bunch of Victoria's Secret models. What do you care about? Kate asked. Credibility, Luke answered. When we first started investigating haunted locations, we weren't trying to get rich or famous. We were trying to prove that life does not end with death, and that there are still things we can't explain. That's all we ever wanted. Now with the show, some people watch and believe, and that's great. But if you read reviews, most critics out there believe it's all a hoax. They think we're a bunch of dumb kids playing it up for the camera. They're critics. Isn't that their job? Michael asked. If it was just them, then it wouldn't bother me. But no one outside of our fan base takes us seriously. Hell, half the people who like the show don't take us seriously. Have you read some of the articles written about me? Luke Rayner, television's fallen angel. Luke Rayner, the spectral sex symbol. They've made me out to be a caricature of myself. Instead of a legitimate paranormal investigator, I've become some sort of weird fetish. Listening to him made Kate realize just how much she'd objectified him. Yeah, she enjoyed watching cemetery tours for the ghosts, but a huge part of its appeal was its sexy lead investigator. That's why I've been trying so hard to get you on the show, Luke continued. I thought it might make people see us a little differently. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about the success we've had. It's more than I could have ever hoped for, and I thank God for it every day. It's just frustrating when you realize that your passion is regarded by so many as nothing but cheap entertainment. For a moment, neither Kate nor Michael spoke. Kate would have never guessed he felt that way. She'd seen every episode of Cemetery Tours. Luke always seemed to be having the time of his life, but he'd never struck her as anything less than professional. He could be a little goofy at times, but to her, that made the show worth watching. She tried watching other ghost hunting shows, and the way they took themselves so seriously just made the whole thing seem boring. Luke and his friends always seemed so into what they were doing, and that drew viewers in as well. At least, that was how she'd always felt. I'm sorry, Luke, she said. Don't be sorry. The last thing I want is for any of my fans to think I don't appreciate them, especially any fans I consider friends. He flashed a quick grin back at her. I do probably owe you an apology, though. Why? I sort of took advantage of you. I knew that Mikey liked you and that he wouldn't be able to say no if you asked him to come tonight. Kate blushed as she glanced over at Michael. who looked like he couldn't believe the words that were tumbling out of Luke's mouth. You know, anytime you want to shut up would be great. He tried to sound like he was making light of the situation, but to Kate, he seemed about ready to jump out of the car and hitchhike his way home. Fine, I'm done, Luke conceded. But for the record, as of December, we are the highest-rated paranormal show on television. An awkward 45 minutes later, they pulled into the Riverview apartment complex, where Luke dropped Kate and Michael off in front of Building 17. It wasn't until after they'd watched his taillights disappear into the darkness that Kate finally spoke. Interesting night, huh? She asked, as they climbed the flight of stairs up to their apartments. Kate moved a little slower than usual, due to her injured knee. That's one word for it, Michael agreed. Once they reached the top, he pulled his keys out of his pocket, preparing to make a mad dash for his front door. So, I guess I'll see you around. Hold up. Kate grabbed his arm. Did you really think you were getting off the hook that easily? I was sort of hoping, Michael admitted. Kate shook her head. Not a chance. Michael sighed. He knew he owed it to her. Besides, thanks to Luke, he really had nothing left to hide. Would you like to come in? He asked. Kate glanced around his front door. Is there a ghost in there? Yeah, but he's friendly. What's his name? Brink. Brink? His real name is Eugene Brinkley, but he'll throw a temper tantrum if you call him that, Michael told her as he unlocked his door. Glancing around the apartment, he wished he'd taken the time to tidy up. It wasn't as horrible as it could have been, but with the laundry basket full of clean clothes waiting to be folded, the shoes kicked aimlessly to the side, and his laptop still sitting on the couch where he'd left it, it could have been a lot better. Sorry it's so messy in here, he apologized. Whoa! Brink appeared suddenly, gawking at Kate. There's a girl here? Michael, I live with my brother. My apartment is always messy, Kate reminded him. What is she doing here? Are you hooking up? What? No, Michael cried. Kate looked alarmed. No, what? She asked. Sorry, not you, Michael apologized. Brink was visibly confused. Wait, did you tell her? Oh, Brink? Kate asked at the same time. Brink stared at Kate like she'd just sprouted a second head. She knows my name? How did this happen? Did you mean to tell her? How did she react? Yeah, he's here, Michael told Kate. But he just said that he would clear out to give us some privacy. Yeah, get lost. I get it. But she's really okay with it? Does that mean you guys are dating? Is she going to be here a lot now? Did you tell her about that guy in her apartment yet? Brink? Michael cast him a warning glance. One more thing. Can you ask her to say my name again? It's been so long since I've heard a cute girl say it. No, get out. Michael cut him off. You know I'm still going to listen in. Out! Brink heaved a dramatic sigh, but finally disappeared. Meanwhile, Michael could feel Kate's curious eyes watching him. He looked at her and was relieved to see she was smiling. Sorry. No, it's fine, she said. Not weird? It's a little weird, Kate acknowledged, taking a seat on the couch. I mean, of all the things that guys don't tell you in the beginning, having a ghost for a roommate is one you really don't expect. Michael grinned, thankful she was trying her best to act nonchalant. He sat down next to her. Do they scare you? No, Michael replied. They startle me from time to time, but they're not at all the way horror films would have you believe. So is that the reason this building is cursed? Because you have all these ghosts following you around? Pretty much. Why don't you talk to them? Try to help them move on. Michael took a deep breath. That's a really long story, he told her. I've got the time if you do. Michael remained silent for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. Although Brink had heard bits and pieces over the years, Michael had never told anyone the whole tale. Truth be told, he wasn't quite sure where to begin. There are a lot of reasons I don't talk to them anymore, and most of them are the same reasons I've never told anyone that I see them. The first, and I guess the most obvious reason, is that I didn't think people would believe me. Or worse, they'd think I was crazy, or making it all up to get attention. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted people to think I was normal, that I was just like everybody else. That's funny, Kate remarked, looking pensive. Why? Well, most people would say that they don't want to be normal. They want to stand out. So the fact that you wanted to be like everyone else, in a strange way, kind of sets you apart. Huh. Never really thought of that, Michael murmured. Don't worry, it's a good thing, Kate smiled. Maybe, but when you're a kid, you'll do pretty much anything to be accepted. Or at least to not have people look at you like a freak. Is that what happened to you? Not as much as you'd think. Mostly they just avoided me. It was like they knew there was something weird about me, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it, he explained. The second reason, the personal one, was my brother, Jonathan. I didn't know you had a brother, Kate said. He was a few years older than me, but he had a lot of problems. Depression, bipolar disorder, you name it. By the time I was old enough to realize that no one else could see all the extra people living in our house, my dad had already left. I saw what Jonathan's illness did to my family. I tried so hard to be normal for my mother, to give her some sense of stability. She didn't need another son hearing voices that no one else could hear. Kate's expression grew somber while she waited silently for him to continue. Against my better judgment, I did try to help some of the spirits I encountered. There was one who wanted me to deliver a message to her 5-year-old daughter. Another wanted me to tell his wife where she'd be able to find the pearl earrings he'd been planning on giving her for her birthday. Then, during my senior year of high school, a guy followed me home from school. He'd been murdered in the alley behind his house, and he told me that he was going to terrorize my family unless I helped him. So I started investigating. I stopped by the library almost every day after school to research it. He told me it wasn't enough. Finally, I decided to take a trip to the neighborhood where he'd been killed. Dumbest thing I've ever done. What happened? It turned out that he wasn't the only guy killed in that neighborhood. So the local police had asked for FBI assistance in the case. They profiled that the suspect would return to the scene to try to relive his crime. When they caught me sneaking around in the dead of night, they thought it was you, Kate concluded. That was the absolute worst night of my life. The look on my mother's face when she arrived at the station to take me home. I'll never forget it. She looked so tired and confused. To this day, I've never felt as guilty as I did on that night. Did that guy finally leave you alone after that? Not until they caught the real killer about a week later. My God, Kate breathed. I can't even imagine. That must have been so hard for you. It wasn't fun, Michael admitted. But you never thought that telling someone may have made things easier? What about your mother? There were times I got really close to telling her, but something always held me back. Then, the summer after my freshman year of college, Jonathan got a lot worse. He started neglecting his meds, and he cut off all contact with us. Kate seemed to know where the story was going. Oh no, she muttered. We got the phone call right before I began my sophomore year. My mother was devastated. And of course, she blames herself for everything. She should have gotten him better help. She should have tried harder. She should have never let him out of her sight. Oh, Michael, I'm sorry, Kate whispered, tears pooling in her pretty eyes. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I am too, but sometimes things happen. You can't really control it. Can I ask you something else? Sure. After all that happened, why didn't you tell your mother then? Maybe it would have brought her some peace. Michael shook his head. It would have done the exact opposite. Why? Because I never saw him. After he died, my mother was terrified that because he'd committed suicide, his soul might not be saved. If I told her that I could see the spirit of everyone she'd ever loved, except for her son, I just don't know what that would have done to her. You don't believe that, do you? That he would be damned because he killed himself? No. I think the reason he moved on so quickly is because he chose to die. It was what he wanted. He had nothing left on Earth to stick around for. No unfinished business. I think that makes a lot of sense, Kate told him. Just then, the clock on the wall chimed 3 times, marking 2:15. Kate sighed. I hope Gavin didn't wait up for me. He'll be pitching a fit wondering where the hell I've been. Her face suddenly broke into a wry grin. At least he trusts you more than Luke. I'll walk you back, Michael offered. They walked the few meters to Kate's door in a comfortable silence. When they reached her apartment, she stopped and looked at him. You know, Michael, I'm really glad you told me, Kate said. I am too, Michael replied. And he was. As much as he hated to admit that Luke had been right about something, he did feel that a huge weight had just been lifted off his shoulders. I do have one more question, though. Okay. Do you want to go out with me? Maybe tomorrow around lunchtime? For a moment, Michael's mind went blank. The next thing he knew, he was tripping over his words, trying and failing to come up with a simple, "Sure, I'd love to," or "That sounds great." But Kate seemed to understand what he was trying to say. With a coy smile, she took a step toward him, rose up on her tiptoes, and kissed him swiftly on the mouth. I'll take that as a yes. Then, with one last grin, she opened the door and disappeared into her apartment. Chapter 15. There was music playing. Kate knew she'd heard this song before, but for some reason, she couldn't name the title or the artist. It was a catchy tune, lively and upbeat, exactly the kind of song she enjoyed listening to while she drove. Then suddenly the music stopped. Everything stopped. With a flash of light and the screech of skidding tires, Kate felt the very air being sucked away from her lungs as her head struck something cold and metallic. The next thing she knew, she was standing on the side of a road, watching snow fall in flurries around her. In the distance, she saw the flashing lights of a fire truck, or maybe an ambulance, gathered around a tall tree. She was too far away to make out what was happening, but she knew from the approaching wail of yet another siren, it wasn't good. Where was she exactly? Wherever it was very bright and very cold. Or at least, it should have been cold. With nothing but snow as far as the eye could see, she should have been freezing. But she wasn't. She wasn't warm either. She simply felt nothing. Only slightly worried, she racked her memory, desperately trying to remember where she was supposed to be. Where would she usually go in a snowstorm? An instant later, she was standing in the middle of a very busy Starbucks. She scanned the room for a familiar face. Was she supposed to meet someone here? She didn't see anyone she recognized. Maybe they hadn't arrived yet. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a large man walking directly toward her. She expected him to maneuver his way around her, but when he didn't alter his course, she had to dive out of the way in order to avoid a collision. "Hey!" she cried. He ignored her, as if almost running her over wasn't rude enough. She hoped he spilled coffee all over his extra-large t-shirt. That is, if he even ordered coffee. From the lack of smell in the usually potent coffee house, everyone in the entire room had ordered odorless tea. "Latte for Dennis?" the barista called. Kate looked around the room. Everyone in the shop seemed to be sipping at a steaming cup of hot coffee. This place should have been reeking of coffee, and yet she couldn't smell it. Why? She wasn't congested. In fact, her nose felt as clear as it had ever felt. So why couldn't she smell anything? And why hadn't she felt the cold? And why, for the life of her, could she not remember where she was supposed to be? Something wasn't right. What had happened? Before she'd found herself standing beside that barren winter road, she must have had some sort of destination. So why wasn't she there now? Something definitely wasn't right. Suddenly, the building felt like it was beginning to close in on her. She looked frantically around the room, desperate for any sort of explanation, or even the simplest form of recognition, but she found none. Just then, she was struck by a powerful jolt across her upper body. It felt like someone had hit the center of her chest with a baseball bat. She inhaled sharply and clasped a hand over her heart. "Are you all right?" The young man's voice was full of concern. She turned to see who'd addressed her and found herself staring into familiar dark eyes. "Michael?" she whispered and reached out to touch his face. Then she woke up. Kate somehow managed to fall back asleep before she climbed out of bed a few hours later, but her mind was still reeling. Eager to see Michael again, she showered and quickly changed into a skirt and tank top before bounding into the living room and greeting Gavin with a cheerful, "Good morning." "Morning. It's almost noon. I thought I was having a stroke when I woke up and realized that I was actually up before you." "Had a late night." "Oh God, Kate, if you were with that Luke person..." "Relax. I was with Michael." "Oh." Gavin sounded a lot more okay with that. Meanwhile, Kate slipped her shoes on and grabbed her keys and wallet off the coffee table next to the sofa. "Going somewhere?" "Yeah, I have a lunch date," she replied. "See you later." "Hey, wait." But Kate was already out the door and practically sprinting across the landing to Michael's apartment. She rapped quickly and a little more loudly than she'd intended on the door. He answered within a few seconds. "Hey, how are..." "You were there," she interrupted. "What?" "The day of the accident. You were there at the coffee shop. That's why I recognized you the first time we met," she explained breathlessly. "You saw me." She watched the expression on his face shift as the memory dawned on him. "That was you?" he asked. Kate grinned. "Yeah. You talked to me. You asked me if I was okay." "I thought you were having a panic attack," he explained. "I didn't realize you weren't..." "Alive?" Kate asked. Michael shook his head. "I only saw your face for a moment before you disappeared. Then I realized that I'd broken my own personal vow of never speaking to a ghost in public." "Well, since I didn't stay a ghost, we can say your record is still clean." Kate grinned. "So, are you ready?" Yeah, let's go," Michael replied. Kate stared up at him, almost like she was seeing him for the first time. Which, in a way, she guessed she kind of was. Everything he told her last night had been unbelievable, and although she had believed him, she hadn't really appreciated how miraculous it was until she remembered looking into his eyes for that brief moment before her heart began to beat again. "Everything okay?" Michael asked. Kate smiled. "Everything's fine," she assured him. Then she leaned in and kissed him as she had the night before. When she pulled back, she could see the blush creeping up his neck and settling on his cheeks. She grinned nervously, her own heart beating erratically. "Shall we?" she asked. He nodded, looking like he was still trying to process what had just happened. Kate laughed and took his hand. They decided on Chili's for lunch, which turned out to be both a poor decision and a good decision. It was a poor decision because Chili's was quite literally packed to its full capacity at lunchtime. It was a good decision because with so many people talking, they were far less likely to be overheard. And since Kate had about 1.5 million questions to ask, she preferred a room full of loud chatter to a calm, quiet cafe. "What can I get you to drink?" their waiter asked once they were seated. Michael looked at Kate. She ordered a Sprite and a water. He ordered Dr. Pepper. "Do you know what you're going to get?" Michael asked as they perused the menu. "I might get some fajitas," Kate answered. "How about you?" "Everything looks good. I haven't eaten since the car ride last night." "Same. And we've done a lot of running since then. Kate remarked, closing the menu. So, are there any in here? You mean ghosts? Michael asked. She nodded. Only two that I've noticed so far. One standing behind that guy over there. He indicated a boy who looked to be in his early teens. He was sitting with a group of friends, but he didn't look particularly cheerful. And the other one is over at the bar. And they just look like regular people? Yeah. Then how can you tell? Sometimes it's hard. Like when I saw you, I had no idea that you were a spirit. But most of the time, it's pretty obvious. Their behavior gives them away. For example, the way they'll stand in a place where no one would usually stand. Odd stuff like that usually wouldn't go unnoticed. That was something that really scared me that day, that no one knew I was there. Then I heard your voice. Knowing you saw me brought me so much peace, even if just for a moment. I think that's why I felt so comfortable around you when we first met. As she spoke, Michael's eyes shifted down to his napkin. What's wrong? I feel so guilty. Why? She asked. Because if I had figured out that you were dead, I would have gone out of my way to ignore you, just like I do all the other ghosts. I wouldn't have said a word to you. I wouldn't have even looked you in the eye. I'd have just gone about my business, pretending you didn't exist. You're trying to protect your family. There's no shame in that. But there is. My grandmother always told me that there's a reason for everything. She even believes that there are reasons that people get sick or lose their jobs or have their houses broken into. She always said that there's a reason that I can still talk to her. She thinks it's such a wonderful gift, and it's completely wasted on me. I wouldn't say that, Kate said, crossing her arms on the edge of the table. I think that if you've used your gift, even if only to help one person, then it's not a waste. And who knows? Maybe the time will come when you'll find a reason for it. Maybe you'll find it on cemetery tours, she teased. Ha, funny. Michael rolled his eyes, but grinned nevertheless. So you really wouldn't want to be on the show? Even if Luke said you could keep your secret? I really wouldn't. Why not? You mean the fact that I would have to work with Luke Rayner isn't enough? Come on, he's not a bad guy. He's obnoxious. He's enthusiastic. Which is a polite word for obnoxious, Michael quipped. Kate laughed. I guess the real reason I don't want to be on the show is because I couldn't handle the lifestyle. You're talking to a guy who has spent his entire life trying to live below the radar. Being on a television show? It just sounds like a nightmare. I don't know, Kate grinned. I still think it would be kind of fun. But then you're talking to a girl who has spent a good portion of her life in front of a television screen. So that's why you're so okay with the ghost thing. All those hours of TV fried your brain. It all makes sense now, Michael said. Cute, Kate remarked as their waiter returned with their drinks and asked if they were ready to order. Once he disappeared again, Kate asked, So what's the worst experience you've ever had with a ghost? After the one that got you arrested. I'm guessing that one sort of takes the cake. Yeah, pretty much. There really weren't too many other horrible experiences. Though there was this one lady. She was huge. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that because she was this rock-solid tower of a woman. And she was terrifying. She had this really stringy hair and a puffy face and these beady little eyes. When she first appeared, I thought she was going to hit me. Can they do that? Oh, yeah. Remember when I fell in the pool yesterday? That was Brink, shoving me in. Are you serious? Unfortunately, Michael said. Anyway, this lady comes up to me. I don't even remember where I was, but she starts yelling and screaming about her son and this girl, and she kept telling me, You've got to get it back. She doesn't deserve it. It's mine. You've got to get it back. It turned out her son had given her favorite necklace to his girlfriend, and she hated his girlfriend. Snap, Kate remarked. Snap? Michael laughed. Yeah, snap, she grinned. Okay, so is there anything you like about what you can do? Michael thought about it. I like that I can still talk to my grandma. I like having a roommate, even though he doesn't help with the rent and makes talking to girls I like really difficult, Michael said. Kate grinned. I like that death has never been much of a mystery. I was 4 years old when my grandmother died, and a lot of people commented on how well I was taking it. A few of them worried that I was taking it a little too well. But she was sitting right next to me at her funeral. I didn't understand that no one else could see her. I didn't know that I was supposed to be sad. And although I don't know where people go once they pass on, I at least know that life doesn't end when your heart stops beating. You know, Luke said almost the exact same thing after I told him about my accident, Kate said, taking a sip of water. I think you and him are more alike than you think. That's not nice, Michael said. I'm serious. I don't know how much you've actually talked to him about this stuff, but I think together, you guys could make a pretty big impact. Is he paying you to say this? No, I'm just saying it, Kate assured him. So what about animals? What about them? Can you see them too? Oh, yeah. My dog, Lolly, still lives with my mom. Lolly? Yeah, like a lollipop. That's adorable, Kate said. After lunch, neither of them was ready to call it a day, so they decided to head over to the adjoining shopping center. There wasn't much to look at. A few trees planted along the sidewalk, a bench here and there, and a lot of stores that held no real appeal for Kate, but were still fun to explore. So, how many ghosts have you actually talked to in your life? And how often do they realize that you can see them? Kate asked. They strolled along the sidewalk, sort of window shopping, but mostly enjoying the weather, the scenery, and each other's company. You know, we've been talking a lot about me this afternoon. I want to know more about you, Michael said. Oh, but I'm so boring, Kate groaned. Not true. I don't know many other girls who would be so cool in this situation. See, when you put it that way, it makes me feel like Bella from Twilight. Michael laughed. Sorry. Kate looked up at him. So what do you want to know? Well, for starters, I've got to know. Did you actually read Twilight? Oh yeah, all 4 of them, Kate answered matter-of-factly. Seriously? In less than a week. That's kind of sad. No, the sad part is that I reread them. Twice, Kate admitted. Next question. Okay. What's your favorite holiday? Tied between Halloween and Christmas. How about you? I like Christmas. Too many ghosts around Halloween? Kate teased. Too many weird people in masks. Michael shuddered. Kate raised an eyebrow. Really? You see ghosts on a daily basis and you think masks are creepy? Ghosts are just normal people. Some of those masks have eyeballs hanging out of the sockets. That's twisted, Kate told him. Okay, so what are you afraid of? Bugs, Yoda, germs, and guys who wear socks with their sandals. Not ghosts? Michael asked. Kate thought about it. There's only one who really scares me, she confessed. Trevor. Have you seen him? Kate asked. Yeah, I saw him the day you moved in. Although there was no doubt in her mind that Trevor existed, Michael's confirmation made her shiver. What does he look like? He's tall. He's got an army haircut, dark eyes. He sort of looks like a biker. And, do you think he's angry at us? I think he's angry at Gavin, Michael answered slowly. Why? You know him better than I do. I can't think of anything. Gavin's never been in trouble a day in his life. Growing up, he was the golden child. Straight A's, athletic, multiple scholarships. I was the one who would get in trouble for staying out late or getting a tattoo or... Wait, you have a tattoo? Maybe. Kate grinned. The point is, whatever problem this guy has with Gavin, it wasn't Gavin's fault. I don't even know where he would have met a guy like that. Michael's brow furrowed. like he was doing some serious considering. We could always ask him. Oh, no. Gavin made it very clear that he doesn't want to hear any more ghost talk. I meant Trevor. Michael stopped and turned to face her. It took Kate a moment to process what he was proposing. After everything he told her the night before, she understood that this wasn't just a simple favor between friends. She wanted to say that she couldn't ask that of him, that he'd already helped them so much. But maybe, just maybe, if they could find out why Trevor was there, they would be able to help Gavin. You do that? She asked. It's something I should have done the day I met you, Michael told her. Kate wrapped her arms around his shoulders. You will never know how much this means to me. Then let's go talk to him. He turned to walk back toward the car, but Kate stopped him. One more thing, she said. Then she took his arm and pulled him down into another kiss. This time, he kissed her back.